All right. All right. Okay. Well, where do you want to start today?
Well, I'd like to start with a question on the gateways,
Yeah.
uh, on the soul gateways.
Yeah.
Um, on the chart here,
Yeah.
the little cluster on the soul gateways that has the mind on it, and under it, it has three bullet items: the unconscious, the subconscious, and the conscience.
Mm.
I'm wondering why that cluster is there, and then over here is the word conscious. So why do we have this cluster, and why do we have the conscience here and even in this cluster? See what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's conscience. So that's the area of our soul that is actually operates as our conscience. The other stuff is conscious, which is where we are God conscious, world conscious, self conscious, world conscious. And then in our mind, there is the subconscious. So that would be the heart, where everything is programmed. So, like the hard drive of a computer, all the programs and memories are stored there. Then you have the unconscious, the gut instinct, where things are sort of like the, if you know computers, read-only memory, which is hard encoded within us, all the things that we do without having to consciously or subconsciously engage. So breathing, the bodily functions, but also the gut instincts. There's a really great teaching by, I think she's an Oriental lady, Dr. something, that talks about the three brains, that we all have neurological synapses within three parts of our body: the actual brain, within our heart, and within our gut. And so there's an aspect there that our mind is our conscious thoughts, where we're actively thinking. Our subconscious is the heart, which actually does the real thinking, because it contains, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, in Proverbs. Um, and they work together. So what's in the heart gets programmed into the mind, usually through triggers um, and activations. Um, so yeah, we are conscious of God through our spirit. We're conscious of self through our soul, and we're conscious of the world through our physical senses. But we have a conscience, and that's the aspect of the soul that is supposed to direct and protect us, to guide um, and put a guard up. So our conscience, of course, is programmed, and there are things which are encoded in there by God, so that we will have a conscience that will enable us to live righteously. But of course, that gets messed up through sin. And so people have their own sense of ethics that allows their conscience to be programmed, normally through nature, but and nurture. So, if you were brought up in a family of thieves, your conscience would not stop you stealing, because you would just be programmed to think that's okay. Whereas if you're brought up in a godly home, that conscience would more likely be saying stealing is wrong. God has encoded some things in there, but the more we engage with Him personally and His Word and His truth, then our conscience becomes part of our soul, which can protect us from doing anything which brings dishonor to God. And if our spirit and the reverence and fear of God areas of our spirit engage our conscience, then they can direct it so that we do nothing that would in any way damage our relationship with God, or in any way distribute to Him by what we do. But our conscience can be seared by sin if we're unrepentant. And what someone did once they may have thought was wrong, but then they did it again and they did it again, and eventually they don't think it's wrong, even though it is, because their conscience no longer, says our conscience is pricked. We prick so we get that little thing. Oh, don't do that. That isn't right. And that can change by our own behaviors, and we can sear our conscience and make it hard. So those are the different areas within our soul gateways. Within the Engaging God manual, I'm doing the gateways module right now. So I've done probably 7, 8 parts. I'm doing the court system there to help deal with it. Then I'm going to look at how to cleanse your gateways, and then looking at the 4 chambers of the heart. So yeah, I'm going to release the first couple of parts of that soon, hopefully. So yeah, I've redone that diagram, or a friend of mine redid it. Makes it a little bit clearer.
So will you go over then reason, emotion, all of those gateways for the soul, and sort of kind of define them?
Yeah, well, our soul is essentially our personality, that which is developed through becoming a living being. And because our soul was separated from our spirit, and our spirit was separated from God, then the soul learned to understand itself and the world around it through whatever came from the outside in. So it's been programmed mostly by nurture, sometimes by trauma, and some, in a sense, by nature. So there can be some encoded DNA programming which programs our personality, and we can receive that personality as in the form of an epigenetic motivation within. And we can also have within our soul iniquity, that there can be areas within our soul that are programmed and have a bias towards sin, particular behaviors. So conscience, as I said, is the area of our soul that is supposed to protect and direct us. Our imagination is the eyes of our heart. So in a sense, I like to think of it as our heart having eyes, ears, and a voice. So the eyes of our heart are our imagination. The voice of our heart is our reason, the voice of reason. And the ears of our heart are our conscience, that which hears things from God and directs us. So it's just sort of just a way of pointing that out. Our imagination, therefore, is a screen which we interpret everything on. Everything's interpreted there. Spiritual revelation, physical realm things is all interpreted on that screen in our mind, which receives information and therefore encodes it to understand it. So, and that can be visual, perceptions, other things operate there on that screen. All these things work together to create us to be a whole being, and when we're partitioned or fragmented or damaged, then they don't work together and we function not in wholeness or peace. Our reason is where we reason together with God, so we have conversation with God, where the thoughts, it's almost the thoughts of God and our thoughts interact in that area. And that reason center is where our values system is, our belief systems, our lies, truth is all occupied in that area of reason. And sometimes we can reason wrongly because we have the wrong information to use. Our emotions are where our feelings are, and that's often where intuition takes place, where some of those gut instincts they move us emotionally to respond to certain situations. Jesus was moved by compassion, and literally it said he was moved in his guts. That's the Greek word. And so we can be moved. Those emotions can operate with things like hope and expectations, and hope deferred makes the heart sick. So areas of our emotions can carry strong disappointment, where we've been let down, betrayed, those type of things in our emotions. Damaged emotions often cause us to develop protection mechanisms, and also those emotional areas are quite strong in anger and different things like that. So we can have damage caused to us by people hurting us, affecting us in a negative way. And those are emotional things. That's where worry and anxiety and those type of things go on in that area. And so they're feelings. And then you have your will, which is the area which is there to help us make decisions. And a will which is self-centered will have stubbornness and rebellion and resistance, but in a positive sense it can have perseverance and courage, and you know, essentially those qualities of faithfulness, and those type of qualities can also be engaging in our will. Now everything within our soul, our mind, the conscious mind works with our choice, because everything comes down to choice. Will we choose to be obedient to God, or will we choose to do our own thing? And as we have free will, we have the right to choose. All those other senses will direct our choice. And the more our spirit engages our soul, that those gateways are cleansed, washed, clean, purified, refined, all the familiar spirits and damage and hurt and everything else, the lies, are removed from those gateways, and that Jesus becomes Lord of those gates, and the Spirit then directs those gates, not what's come from the outside, but what's come from the inside, connected to heaven. Then those gateways can be operating together as an integrated whole person. And that's God's desire. So our spirit, soul, and body completely functions together. And as we grow our spirit and learn to build our spirit can actually grow around our soul and body and form an atmosphere of the kingdom around us, where our spirit engages things first. And the problem is our physical senses often engage things first. That triggers things in our soul, and our spirit, because we have not grown it, and our spirit has not learned to rule, comes along last and often gets in on the act when it's too late, when we've made a bad decision, or we've been motivated by something out of the soul area or out of sin. Our eyes, particularly for guys, and our eyes can see something. It says they're the windows of the soul. It can promote desire in us, and we can find ourselves reacting out of that desire because we're motivated by the things that are programmed into those vision centers, and they produce, even chemicals in our body can be produced through experiences that are motivated or triggered by images, and those images can move us to action. Now obviously God desires that everything impure in our hearts, having pure hearts, we can engage God and draw near to him. So if our spirit is active, and all the gateways of our spirit are active, and they encompass our soul and sort of engage it, then our soul comes into agreement and is directed from the inside out, not the outside in, or not independent. But our soul often has soul ties to our spirit, where it's operated independently to meet its own needs rather than finding the needs met in God, and those soul ties need to be broken, which is why we have to separate soul and spirit to identify where the direction is coming from, and then see it reintegrated when any familiar spirits are dealt with. Often familiar spirits sit outside of our spirit gates and try and block the flow, and they sit within our soul gates, and they can be very powerful in leading us down to patterns of behavior, thinking, emotional issues. So it comes down to choice. Will I choose? And that's why our spirit gate, which is the most powerful spirit gate, is our worship gate. And worship is not where we sing songs to God, but where we engage God and acknowledge him as Lord, Father, and we, in obedience, bow down and come into agreement with his will and purpose. Then we have choice. Free will is been given to us. If we look into the wrong direction, if we're looking into the world for what will promote those choices, then we usually make bad choices. If we're directed by our spirit, joined to the Holy Spirit, then we make good choices. So everything needs to be flowing, connected, open, and everything flowing from the inside out. Therefore, heaven can flow through us, and we become a gateway. Rivers of living water flowing through us. So you have, the Eden and the garden in Eden and the river of life that flowed out and was supposed to water the world. Well, then that now is us. And so we are now flowing from the inside out. But it takes some time to cleanse and sort those gateways out. And it's an absolutely vital component of learning to express the kingdom and manifesting the kingdom around us as everything flowing and connected from the inside. I mean, I practiced engaging all of my gateways every day and flowing them and connecting my spirit to my soul for 2 or 3 years, so that I could get to a place where I become more integrated. And now I'm much less soul orientated in the sense of being directed by my soul. So I don't make a lot of conscious decisions based in cognitive, well, I'm going to try and figure this out and work this out and make a decision. I feel led, and my soul is very happy with that now. Whereas at the beginning, it needed to know. It needed to know what was going on so that it would feel safe, then it would agree. And God showed me really that is not faith, and that's not trusting him. I need to trust him, and in trusting him, that I will come into agreement with him. So my soul very much is a facilitator of engaging the world around me as my spirit directs it now, rather than what it was before in terms of protecting me and keeping me safe in its own way. And that was in independence. Now I find myself just being led, doing things. I don't think about an awful lot in a sense of, okay, I'm going to think about making that decision. I just do stuff, and my spirit directs it, and my soul's very happy, and it's found that it finds fulfillment from the inside out, not the outside in anymore, because the outside in caused most of the damage that I ended up with. So all the experiences of life which damaged me came from the outside, not the inside. So the soul, once you expose it to the spiritual reality of being one with God, he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit. So first love, feeling loved, accepted, affirmed, valued, appreciated, approved of, which are God inspired needs that we all have and were supposed to be met in him. Most of us had to get them from the outside because we had no connection to God. So, and those things from the world, whether through relationships, money, power, position, all the things that the world offers to meet our needs, in most of us cause damage and hurt and pain. And therefore we build up protection mechanisms and coping mechanisms and those things around us, which then we have to get dismantled. Yeah.
Quickly, the Asian lady, is that Professor Yamabuchi?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. There's a lady, a doctor so-and-so or something, that has a teaching on the 3 brains and how we think and operate differently within those areas of neurological synapses and neurons that are connected. And everything within our spinal column carries the nervous system, which is connected to everything within our body, and that's where our spirit resides, separated from our blood in the cavity over our brain and down our spinal cord. So that's why it's connected to all the senses from everything, and that's why when our spirit starts to communicate, our nervous system can pick up the frequency of that communication, and our brain can learn to interpret it. But you have to practice, because the brain has learned to interpret everything else, whether sight, hearing, everything else from the outside through practice. We have to help it train our spirit through praying in tongues and meditating and engaging vision and drawing on our spirit and listening to our spirit and God's spirit, so that then we can receive that revelatory direction, communication from heaven through our own spirit, and know what's going on spiritually. So I want to engage the world around me by my spirit first, because that's how Adam was created, with his spirit on the outside around him, and that's why he could travel in the realm of the spirit. When we're trans-relocated, that's what happens. We're trans-relocated spirit, soul, and body, because our spirit takes our body into another realm and back out. And we have to learn how to do that. Yeah.
You talked about our spirit trans-relocating. I was thinking about when we sleep. How I've heard Ian talk about when he sleeps, he's ascended, he's in heaven, he's traveling around, whatever. I don't know how to describe it, but what should we do before we fall asleep in regards to prayer and engaging with God in our sleep?
Okay. Ian has got a teaching called the Night Watch, in which he teaches that you can train your soul to be awake and to engage with your spirit, so you can be conscious of being in the realms of heaven while your body is at rest. He teaches that actually sleep is something that is a result of the chaotic life that we live and what we put into our body. So our body needs complete, in a sense, sleep. And it talks about in the Bible that God gives us rest rather than sleep. Sleep in the Bible often refers to death, in fact. And generally, when you go to sleep, you get a black screen in your mind, so there's nothing to engage in. Well, if we train our senses that isn't a black screen, then our spirit can engage. I personally have struggled in that Night Watch thing. I didn't find Ian's teaching on it very sort of inspiring. He talked about standing up and going to sleep standing up and some weird stuff, which is like, that sounds like real hard work. But I've talked to some other people who talked about when you wake up between, say, 4 and 6 in the morning, you can train yourself to go back, your body to go back into a place of rest, but your soul to stay awake. And there's a way of like waking yourself up every 5 minutes and recentering and refocusing until your body is at rest, but your soul is awake and it can engage with the spirit. Now, I've not personally felt drawn to that. What I do when I go to bed every night, I engage my spirit in activity by presenting it to God for His purposes during the night. And when I engage in the realm of the spirit, my spirit stays there. So my spirit is in that realm now. And there's a difference between the consciousness of my spirit and my spiritual place within me. So my spirit, where the first love gate is and where God resides when we invite Him in to fill us, and those spiritual gateways, it's like the place where my spiritual consciousness resides in me. So I can be separated consciously, spiritually, and be in heaven, but I still have my spirit has the effectively God's presence within it and the kingdom within it, and is still able to create an atmosphere around me, even though I might not be consciously there, because I'm focused on my spirit being in the realm of heaven. So when I go to sleep, I just engage God and ask him, if you want to use me tonight, I'm available. If you want to bring me revelation tonight, if you want me to do anything or go anywhere, I'm totally available for you to use me within time and space. Just use me. Now, sometimes people have talked and told me that they've seen me doing things in the realm of heaven that I don't remember doing. And sometimes I do, you know. And so when my spirit is on my mountain now, ruling, and it is connected to me through those senses that I learned to interpret, and so I'm receiving heavenly wisdom, and that is flowing into me all the time, which is why I can often say things and do things that I'm not consciously or cognitively aware of, because I'm connected to that realm. My spirit is operating in that realm, bringing heaven to earth. If I choose to focus my consciousness on that, so I begin to think about and close my eyes and learn to engage that realm, then I then tune out of this realm, and the eyes of my heart engage what's going on where my spirit is, and I become conscious of what I'm doing there. And that's, you know, what I do every day. In the beginning of my day, I become conscious of that. Then I step out of that in terms of conscious focus and begin to focus on what I'm doing. You know, if you've got to drive down the road or go to work, you have to be consciously looking at what you're doing here. But my spirit is still there. I'm still connected. And I can be praying in tongues. My spirit can be engaging in communication without having to have conscious connection to that. And now I do that very much instinctively. I don't think about, well, I'm going to pray in tongues now. I just find that I'm doing it. My spirit is, I've taught my spirit to be continually bubbling in that tongue. So I'm just in a constant state of communication. Now, that doesn't mean I'm conscious of it, but as soon as I tune into it, I can become aware of what I'm doing. You know, if I tune into what my spirit's doing now, you know, it's all me. It's just where I'm focused my attention. So at the moment, I'm focusing my attention on talking to you, but I practice so that I can be talking to you, but also be aware of what I'm doing there. So, you know, at the moment in that realm, you know, I am on my throne, and I have a scepter and a crown, and there is some angels around me right now. Now I can flip from one to the other because I've just practiced a lot, just sensing where I am, and I'm not using my physical sight or hearing or anything else, but I'm using what I've learned to engage with is the communication of the spirit, which is for me a knowing. You know, I don't need to see to know. I know because my spirit is there, and I know what it's doing. You know, but I've taken some time to get to that point, and I feel so much more integrated and one than I ever used to. You know, because my soul isn't in opposition anymore. You know, that doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes at times, or sometimes things get triggered that I'm unaware of, and my soul defaults to something. It can do that, and when it does, then I take it to the courts and find out what's there or why it's there, and then get refined and purified and deal with that error of my soul. But predominantly my soul is in agreement with my spirit now. You know, so yeah, that's a process, you know, that I've engaged in and now benefiting from. You know, a lot of people want the spiritual activity without having to deal with the soul, and it just won't work. You know, your soul will block, even, you know, unintentionally, but it will, because it's just that's what the soul has learned to do. and fear and other things and religious doctrine and things that are there within our belief systems all have the potential to hinder us when it comes to spiritual activity. So removing those blockages and hindrances and stumbling blocks and purifying and getting the river of life to wash through and the fire of the glory of God to purify and refine each of the gates, it's really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. I been working on my gateways for about 5 months now, and I'm really determined to get them cleansed.
Yeah.
And also working on killing kings and dividing the soul and the spirit. So those three things.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of had it with the roller coaster life. One moment it's real good, and the next moment, I don't know, I'm on that roller coaster, and I've had it. And so I just have become very determined in getting the gateways cleaned. And so whatever comes up in my soul, which is usually in the morning, the early morning times, it feels like when you wake up, everything is just kind of bombarding you. So instead of letting it bombard, I've been just going to my gateways and just cleansing them. And with the kings, I'm not quite sure how to take them as individual kings and relate them to my life. I know we look at our behavior and that kind of thing. But I like to get everything kind of clumped together and be, I don't know if it's right or wrong, and be thorough and presenting all the kings, because I figure every single one of those kings were somehow in my DNA, integrated and recorded in my DNA. So I figure I'm covering everything. And I'm praying that prayer from Ian's teaching on killing kings.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you could do that, or if that's the wisest way or route to go in killing these kings. But that's what I'm doing.
Okay, great, good. Okay. Has anyone else got anything they want to share or questions they want to ask?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
I do. We can cleanse our own gateways. What about widows? Does the marriage line have to be addressed?
In context of your own life?
Well, in context that there was that union there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you've been in relationship with someone else, that will have had created soul ties in your soul, and soul ties are not necessarily a bad thing between husband and wife. They're a good thing, providing that they're not selfishly motivated. Once that covenant is broken through death or divorce, then you are no longer connected to that person, although the needs may still be there. And I would always encourage people to break soul ties and reconnect them to God, so that your spirit and soul can come back together. But I think if you deal with your own life, you will deal with the things that have been affected by others, because anyone you're connected to, does have an effect, but you don't have to deal with it in them. You deal with it in you. So I would only be like, dealing with kings and all that sort of stuff in the past. I just ask God, show me. Sometimes I will go to the court if I feel there's an accusation or something. I don't sort of try and dig for things. I present myself as a living sacrifice, and I ask God to reveal, and then I use my behaviors or my reactions to situations in life as a guide to areas that I need to focus on. And I have a whole teaching around that, which I'm going to include in the Gateway teaching, which is using trauma to produce transformation. So if you're willing to look at your reactions and address them, and they can be good indicators of areas that are weeds or seeds or stones within our heart that are triggers to our reactions rather than our responses. Um, yeah. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about somebody else. Just deal with you, and therefore, whatever you've been connected with that person, it will be sorted out when you deal with yourself. If you're
Okay.
together, of course, then sometimes it's good to encourage each party to look at their own issues and to come together in unity of heart and mind and work that through. um, but it's not always easy to do that, depending on the openness of each person to themselves and to each other, in transparency and creating that culture of honor in a marriage relationship. If there's a defensiveness about anything, then you've got a problem. Any sort of defensiveness is an indication that there is a coping or protection mechanism in place. And the only reason we get defensive is to defend a position or a thing that we think we're right, which is often self-righteousness and an unwillingness to listen to someone else's view and be open to seek that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike.
Yeah. Hiya.
Hey, you mentioned earlier about the integrating the soul and the spirit.
Yeah.
And for years, with what I've heard from Ian and you and guys in your stream about teaching about separating the soul and the spirit. Can you describe, like, is there a maturing process where you try to reintegrate that, or is that certain events or times that you're integrating the two? How is the teaching of the separation of the soul and the spirit, and what you mentioned earlier, integrating them together? How do they coexist? When does that work?
Yeah. Well, we were created by God in God's image, spirit, soul, body, in that order. Our spirit already existed in eternity. It came into our body, for us at conception. For Adam, God breathed the breath of life into him, and he became a living being, a soul, living soul. And they were operating spirit, soul, body, and the body effectively just served as how we can interact with the world. Now, as our soul is independent from our spirit, because our spirit is separated from God, but it is the life that's in our body. Without our spirit, we die. If our spirit leaves our body, we die, unless we're born again. Our spirit can now leave our body because the Holy Spirit resides in us. If in the occult realm, when people astral project, they don't astral project their spirit, they astral project their soul. And they have to be connected to their spirit by what they call a silver cord. And if that silver cord is cut while someone is outside of their body, then they die. And if anyone ever astral projects, threaten them with that. But in reality, when our soul has developed from the outside in, we often draw life from the spirit to operate independently. So there are soul ties that are connected to our spirit that give the soul the life of independence, which it then draws from the world to engage its needs. And sometimes those can be occult things, like there can be a connection to our revelation gate that draws things that have drawn revelation from the occult realm, and different things like that. Religious spirits operate in the sense when through reverence and fear of God, and that area of our spirit, our soul can connect to, and it carries often a very legalistic religious spirit attached to it. So when we come to separate our soul and spirit, what we're doing is identifying the source of life, whether it's coming from the spirit or the soul, and then separating any connections that the soul has for independence, drawing life from the spirit in an independent way. So you cut those soul ties. And that's really what the separating soul and spirit is doing, separating the soul ties. Now, God never intended us to be individual parts. He intended us to be a whole being. And therefore, the reintegration of soul and spirit is where our spirit becomes one with him, joined to the Lord every day through our first love gate. We're yoked to Jesus. We have the living water flowing in us. The Father is on the seat of government in our life. We're joined. And then our spirit then can engage our soul correctly and direct it. All our spirit gates open and active, leading and directing our soul. So we become one. You know, we're not, okay, it becomes what it is. It's like, I'm not like, oh, my spirit's going to do this, my soul's going to do this, or my body's going to do this. I'm just me. But I'm led by my spirit, and my spirit rules in being joined to the Lord and one with him, and my soul surrenders and yields to that. It's like there's no fight any longer. It was a fight for a long time, you know, because my soul didn't trust God, you know. And when I learned to trust him, and that was, you know, through a really 4-month period for me of intense darkness that brought me to that place of, hey, I don't care whether my soul knows anything. I trust God. I love him. He loves me. Doesn't matter whether I do anything or don't do anything. I know his love, and he knows that I love him. That changed my need to know, to feel safe, secure, and all those things. Totally changed it. And that was the last part of separating soul and spirit for me, in which then my independence and the need to cognitively do things was broken, and I yielded and surrendered to a whole different level. But now my spirit, every day I expand my spirit, if you like, in the morning to encompass my soul and body, looking to create an atmosphere so rivers of living water are flowing around me, producing life. That's the picture of Ezekiel 47, ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep, out of its depth, and therefore bringing life wherever it goes. Rivers of living water, according to John 7:36, 7 and 8, flowing from our innermost being. And what are those living waters doing? It's the spirit. It talks about it as the spirit. You know, we have a fountain or a spring within us because we've drunk living water, and it becomes that fountain, a source of life. That's our spirit. Our soul just needs to draw on that in a right way so that God flows through us, and we're then flowing together as one person. So separating is something that just simply you could say, hey, my soul surrenders. You know, and David spoke to his soul in Psalm 100, and I think it's Psalm 100 or Psalm 103, saying, you know, bless the Lord, O my soul. So he was telling his soul to focus on blessing the Lord, because he was moved by his spirit, because he had his spirit, because he was a worshiper and he had developed his spirit, and the Holy Spirit was with him in a way that was not with most other people in the Old Testament, because of the way he engaged in the future, hence David's tent and the tabernacle of David, that type of seeing what it was like to have an open relationship with God without going through a temple or a structure. Yeah, so that's really what God desires, oneness, so that we're not really aware of the different parts of who we are. We just flow. And it's like Father, Son, and Spirit. We're made in the image of God. They are always aware of each other. There's no competition or independence. There's different functions, as our body, soul, and spirit have different functions, but they're totally in cooperation with one another, as Father, Son, and Spirit are, to outwork the purposes of God and the plans of God and God's will. As we yield and surrender, then we can come into that cooperation so that God can do his work through us. Jesus said, the Father in me does his works through me. And that's really the desire of my heart, is that God in me and the kingdom in me, in my spirit, I let God out of that realm. I let him begin to be Lord of the whole of my life, and I give my free will to him every day. I don't want to choose other than to follow him. And, my will is to do his. That's what I want. Jesus said, not my will, but yours be done. He wasn't going to do his own thing. He was going to yield his will only to do God's. And that's why God was able to use him, and he was able to do everything he saw the Father doing. That's a pretty sort of integrated life and flow of being together in oneness and unity and peace. Really. So yeah. Okay.
Mike, one of my mountains, one of my 7 is named Adventure, and
Yep.
God really means something with that. I mean, a friend of mine and I, we go into the kingdom to explore and, see all that God has for us. And sometimes we go in through different access points, like the wound in his hand. This time, Monday, we went through the wounds in his head. Somehow, when we were traveling, we were in what looked like Metatron's cube, and you know how all the circles are the little realms. There were like different groupings of people all traveling in this cube towards something, and it led me to really wonder the New Jerusalem, the makeup of New Jerusalem. Is there a connection or a similarity between Metatron's cube and New Jerusalem? What do you think?
That's an interesting question. Metatron's cube. It's very interesting. You talk about adventure and stuff. I was engaging with Enoch this week, and Enoch gave me a quest to an adventure to go and engage Metatron's cube and to explore it. So it's quite interesting. He told me to go beyond. So I'm like, okay, all right. And essentially, Metatron's cube is a representation at many different dimensional levels of how God holds everything together. And so there are intersections of connections, of relationship, and spiritual dimensional authority, what was, what is, what will be. It operates on a multi-dimensional level. At its base level, our very fabric of existence is held together in that pattern. All the forces of physics form that pattern. There's a really good TED seminar thing on that, where all the different forces hold all the particles together so that we remain in a shape. Metatron's cube also is a representation, I believe, of the pattern that exists in eternity in the heart of God, that holds the record of everything he designed. And we can re-engage that pattern to recreate that which has been changed, because nothing ever is destroyed, it just changes form. So if you know the original pattern, then you can reshape things or restore things back to its original condition. So within it, there's the revelation of God's original intention, and how it talks about Jesus holds everything together in Hebrews 1 by the voice of his power. And so his voice carries a vibrational frequency which is the divine enabling power of God, which is the grace of God, and it's in everything. Ephesians 4:6 says God is in and through and over everything. And so this pattern is replicated in everything. And it's a fractal. If you know anything about fractals, they are pictures within pictures within pictures within pictures, and the whole huge picture is made up of the same thing replicated over and over and over again. And every dimension is held together by a pattern that God has created. And I think that in the intersections are points of governmental authority, they're points of power, or things that hold attraction. I mean, I've not explored it much yet, but I sort of have an awareness of it, I think, because I've engaged it. So it's an interesting thing. So yeah, the New Jerusalem is something which is created. It is a governmental place, which is a pyramid, and those pyramids you find within Metatron's cube, and there's different structures and the shapes that are within there that carries authority, and definitely it's got 12 foundations and 12 gates, and there are different patterns within it which you can see when you read about it, and it doesn't mention a lot, but if you go there and you engage it, you'll find that it's shaped not as a cube but a pyramid which makes up and is part of a cube. If it's difficult to describe, but I'm working on trying to draw it in a way that people might understand how the circle of the deep is made up. That's 12 chancellors' houses, because they're also connected to the shape of that cube and the New Jerusalem, and how that's patterned dimensionally to engage eternity and the different dimensions. I know I'm sort of waffling a bit, because it's difficult to describe something in terms that you've not quite got to use, but it is a very significant place for times and seasons and arrangement and alignment of the different seasons and times in God. So enjoy your adventures.
Yeah, that's
it's quite interesting when
mind-boggling.
you talked about entering in through. I guess if you're going in, stepping into Him through different aspects of that. Never really thought about it like that myself. I just step in and engage through an open door, and engage Him there. So, but yeah, interesting. That may have for some people that might be a good way for people to see that they can engage by going through Him and being in Him, and therefore being able to engage the spiritual realms through different access points. My general access points, well, I mean, anyway, I can just step in anywhere I've been, because it's now part of me and part of a pathway. But generally, I access through First Love Gate and go into Eden, or I access through, the open door and Jacob's Ladder. But there are probably lots of different ways that you can engage. So.
Yeah, every now and then I'm invited to come in through different points. I mean, I went in through the wound in the hand, and it led right to the heart of the Father. I mean, it's adventure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, going into the heart of the Father is a key place to engage, because that's where we can engage in what was, when we can go back into who He created us to be, and we can find who we are and our identity in the vast sum of His thoughts. And that then can shape how we live, because when we are there standing in what was, in who we were without sin, then it enables us to make decisions and walk that out during our day, so we get to the end of our day and the end and the beginning should match, and the beginning is eternity and the end is how we've lived this day. And if we're standing in the beginning, then we can walk out the end and look back and see they should be the same. And if they're not, then we get to start over the next day with a new beginning, because at the end of the day there's always the beginning of a new. But if we engage in the heart of God in the beginning of our day, then we can outwork that and walk out, so that that day will change in reality, because we are outworking it from that perspective of eternity rather than now. If we stand in what is all the time and walk out our day, we'll only be walking it out of our present experience. And even though that present experience may contain good things in our relationship with God, it won't contain the things that you have when you stand in what was and engage eternal things, because they're without sin, and that your spirit can receive that. That's why getting your soul purified, your soul will be able to receive a revelation of what your spirit has when it's able to engage it. And ultimately, going back thinking about gateways, what you are in the realm of the spirit is a light being, and you carry a frequency, and the more you engage in eternity and within the realms of heaven, you vibrate at that frequency and carry it. When you then engage your soul begins to resonate with that frequency and come into alignment with it, that then can bring transformation to your physical frame. Because your soul then is mediating to the body and the world around you from a higher frequency realm. And often when we're sick and different things, is because our body is at a low frequency and it needs a higher frequency, and the pure frequency obviously is love. You know, and going back into the heart of God, you're experiencing pure love and pure light. They're a powerful combination of wave and particle. I'm not going to go into that quantum physically, but I had a revelation about it anyway. So yeah, go explore. But be careful that you don't just become an explorer and not a pioneer, because explorers just find out about things. Pioneers actually form settlements based on what they find. And God wants us to be pioneers that establish things, not just explorers that have experiences. So a pioneer explores, but they then establish on the basis of their exploration and take new territory through it. So that's always a good thing. Anyway, I better leave it there.